G'day guys, and welcome back to my lab and to our series on Zero to Zelda, our Godot for ARPG guide. Now hopefully if you've been following along, yours should look something like this. So far we've created our player, our tile map, we've animated, and what else have we done? We've done our camera. What we're going to do today, a little bit more exciting. Okay, so what are we getting up to today? Well, we're going to be adding our collision shape to our player, and also we're going to import some trees and rocks and things to make our tile map a bit more interesting, and hopefully we will start to implement some non-linear progression as well. Why? Well, so our player can interact with the world around them, and also so we can start thinking about our game design theory, because we're going to come back to that many times throughout the course as well as at the end. So it's important to be thinking ahead as we're doing our design. So what skills do we need today? Well, you're going to need to understand how to add collision shapes, and you're also going to need to understand and apply non-linear progression to your tile map. And your success criteria for today? Well, by the end of the lesson, hopefully your player character starts running into things. So what is non-linear progression? We talked about it just a moment ago. Well, non-linear progression refers to a game design concept that allows players to sort of explore and progress through a game in multiple different ways. So there's not a fixed or predetermined path like you might get in a platformer, right? So players have the freedom to choose their own path, tackle different challenges in different orders to what others might do them, and that way they can approach the game in their own way. Why do I love non-linear progression so much? Well, it's because it encourages exploration. So by allowing players to access areas they might not yet be ready to conquer, it encourages them to explore, and it encourages their curiosity, right? So players can see what is coming up, and that can build anticipation and motivation to gain the necessary skills they need to tackle those areas in the future. We're going to go on a very quick neuroscience sidetrack here. So did you know that the anticipation of a reward can actually be more fulfilling, more rewarding than the reward itself? It's part of why we get addicted to infinite scrolling on social media, right? So our brain is convinced that very soon something interesting is going to appear on our phone, even though we could spend incredible amounts of time looking through without anything actually taking our interest. But we're still engaged because our brain is convinced something exciting is about to happen. And because of that, our brain is drip feeding a little bit of dopamine, keeping us excited, keeping us engaged, keeping us anticipating what's about to come. And we can apply this neuroscience truth in our game design by using things like non-linear progression. When we start talking about modern games, things like World of Warcraft, though I suppose that's not modern anymore, it still is to me, but things like World of Warcraft are a massive open world, and they have that non-linear progression. You can choose which direction you go. When you start World of Warcraft as a human, you start in that newbie area, but you can just leave it and go and try and take on bigger things. You'll die, but you can do it, which gets you interested in the next step. So you might try a bit harder to pass your newbie training, things like that. So we see these dynamic gameplay experiences, and it's all because of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda really was a foundational game in so many ways, and it was one of the early adopters of this design philosophy. And it stems back to what we were talking about before with the lead designer and his passion about adventure and curiosity, and how he tried to bring that into his game design. So having an open world that you can explore non-linearly taps into that sense of adventure. So when we're making an ARPG, it makes sense that you have non-linear progression. So that way your players can explore at will, they can progress at their own pace and don't feel like they're forced along one specific path. So how are we going to apply this? Well, the easiest way is wherever you make your start location, make sure your player has got multiple avenues for exploration. There's not just one fixed way. So if we start in the top left corner, you might have exits to the right and to the bottom. But if you start in the middle, for example, if your player starts there, they can explore all directions of the map. The actual Legend of Zelda map starts sort of middle bottom, and we'll show that in just a moment and talk about it in detail. Here it is, the entire original 1986 The Legend of Zelda map. And that's it, 16 screens across by 8 screens down. That's the entire thing. And where I've got that circle there, that's where you actually start when you first come into the game. The middle screen at the bottom. So you've got the entire map to head off and explore. Straight away, you've got 4 different places you can go. You can actually go to the right, you can go to the left, you can go up, or you can go into a little cave that's there as well, which if you've never played it before, that's where you go and get your sword, all right? Little spoiler there for you. Head straight for the cave and get your sword. You need it. But that's it. So we're going to try and implement some of this. If you look around the map, you see that it's all about channeled paths leading you in places, but then there are branches you can follow. There might be barriers made just out of rocks or trees. Sometimes the barrier, which is more of a gating concept, is maybe that the enemy is going to be too tough for you in that area unless you get another weapon or something like that. So you could even consider the very start of the game, you need to go and get that sword, right? That's kind of a gating technique. And we're going to talk more about gating later on. Today, though, we want to focus more on that non-linear progression. So allowing multiple directions for your player to explore is probably the main idea that I want you guys to remember for your tile map design. I wanted to talk briefly about some predictable problems that you might be encountering. So I referenced the rulers for setting up the limits of your camera, and it is possible that you might not have rulers turned on. And if you're not sure how to do that, at the top of your 2D scene view, there is a button that says view. If you click on that view button, it then gives you some view options, and you want to have show rulers selected. So I turn it off there, the rulers disappear, turn it back on, and there it is. So that's worthwhile knowing. You can turn your rulers on and off there. The other predictable problem I was thinking about might be occurring in the form of tabs. So if you look closely at our script here, you can see that this function ready is all the way across to the left hand side, but our animated sprite equals animated sprite 2D line here is actually tabbed across, and you can see that with this little symbol there, the arrow and the line, that is sort of saying we've tabbed over by 1. And it's important in pretty much every kind of computer language that you get your tabs correct. So making sure that you followed those patterns. So if you see this one's here and this one's here, you need to go across by 1, right? So making sure you get all your tabs done correctly. Here's our if. This one's already come across by 1 because it's beneath this physics process function. So the function is all the way across to the left. Our variable there is 1 across, but if we then have something that has its own subordinate, then that goes another tab across. So just try and follow the patterns that you see. If in doubt, look for those little symbols that show you that it's a tab. And that's it for now. If you do have any other issues that come up, please let me know and I'll try and address them as soon as I can. All right, there's a couple of things we're going to need to do first to make everything else we're going to do a lot easier. So first thing I want to do is actually grab the forest resources sprite sheet from the fantasy pack that we downloaded in our first episode. I want to grab that particular one, which I've got here, forest resources, and I want to bring that into the Godot file explorer. So I'm just going to drag it across, drop it in like we did before, and now that's there. So that's the first thing I wanted to do. We've got our forest resources in here. The next thing we need to do, because we're doing things like collision shapes, we want our player to run into things, we actually need to enable the physics layer on our tile map. So what I want to do now is click on tile map. So we've got the world scene open. I've clicked on tile map that comes under world, and then over here in our tile set, so you've got to click on tile set at the top. You can see here we've got this menu here called physics layers. I'm going to open that up and then click add element. So we're just adding in one physics layer basically, and we've got, or physics layers, sorry, and we've got all these collision layers and masks and things that we can play around with, and we'll go into more detail as we go along. But for now, the main thing to remember is we just needed to add that element. So now we've got physics layers enabled, we can move on to the next step. What is that next step? Well, the first thing I want to do is add the collision shape to our player. So if you can click on the player scene at the top, which should take you to the one where you don't have any tiles showing, just your player character. And then what we want to do is actually create a new child node called collision shape. So you start typing in collision shape and that one should come up. So actually I've got that under the wrong thing, just as a child of the player, not of the animated sprite 2D. So that's my collision shape, but there's no actual shape there, right? So the thing we need to do now is head on over to where we've got collision shape 2D in our inspector menu. Then you've got shape, and then it says empty. We don't want that to be empty. So click on empty and let's use a capsule. Now you might remember I was talking to you about move and slide in one of the earlier episodes. Capsules make that a bit easier. If you've got sharp corners, move and slide can actually not work quite as well. A capsule, because it's rounded, it really enables that move and slide to work a bit better. But this is way too big. So we want to, it'll probably, my dude's so squat, it'll probably end up being a circle by the time we actually reduce it down. The other thing though with our collision shape, and something we're not going to do in this one, but we're going to do maybe in the next one, is we want to do a thing called Y sorting, where we want, you know, if a player's in front of a tree, they show in front of the tree, but they can walk behind the tree and all that sort of thing. So if our collision shape is the entire player, that actually gets messed up a bit. So we only really want our collision shape to be kind of our legs or lower part. So I'm just going to make that a bit smaller, drag it down. That might be a bit too small. Something like that, I think I'm happy with as my collision shape. Excellent, so that's done. Now what we need to do is head back over into our world and start messing around with our tile map. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go to our world scene. So remember, at the top of our screen, these are all our scenes that we've got open here. So click on world, and that should take you back. And now you guys there, and you can actually see his collision shape on him now. Excellent, we're doing the right thing. So what I would like us to do now is to be on our tile map and head down to our tile set at the bottom. All right, so tile set is what we've got selected. What we want to do now is grab that forest resources that we were playing, that we dragged into our file explorer before, and drag that into our tile set. And then it gives us that warning about auto creating things. Click on yes. Excellent. So we've got our tile set now having our grass and our trees and rocks. What I want to do now is create some layers so that we can put those things on different layers. So far we've just got the one layer. We haven't named it or anything. Here it is over here under the layers tab. If you haven't opened that, just expand the layers one. So we're still on tile map. In our inspector though, we want to be in layers. So you can see here it's got no name at the moment. I'm going to call this one grass because that's primarily what we've put in there, grass, and hit enter. So we've now created the grass layer. That's the layer we've already got all of that stuff on, all that green grass and whatever else you've made. We could maybe call it ground because I know I've got water and stuff in there as well, but grass will do for now. I'm going to edit this map as we go along. Now we want to come down and add another element, and we're going to call this one trees. Oops. And then we want to add another element and call this one rocks. So now we've got our 3 different layers. The next step is to start setting up these tiles so that they work really well in our map. All right, so we should still have our tile set there, and we should have our forest resources being the ones selected. What I want you to do is to get the select tool and then come over to our tree. Actually, let me make this bigger so we can all see what we're doing. So here is our tile set with all our resources, right? So you can see it's already made those tiles for us, but I actually want to change some tiles this time. And I encourage you to actually watch what we're doing here and maybe apply it back into the forest PNG one as well if you've used some of those multiple tile objects. But what we're going to do here is, so we're not going to do this for everything. You can in your own time, but we're going to change this tree so that instead of it being 2 separate tiles, it's actually one large tile. And the way we do that, so you make sure you've got the select tool, come over here. So we've got the top one. I'm going to go to the second tile down. I'm going to right click and then hit delete. And you can see how that's grayed out now. We can't see it anymore. Now I'm going to click on the top one, which was the top half of the same tree. And where we've got size in Atlas, I'm going to change the Y to be 2. And does that make sense? So X1, so X is going across the page and it's only 1 square, but Y going down the page, the tree's actually 2 squares. So we leave X as 1, change Y to 2, hit enter, and now you can see that that's one large object for that tree. Feel free to do some more of these later on. Maybe actually what we'll do, we'll have a play around with one more. We will do this particular 4 square rock. So to follow the similar pattern, we need to delete the ones that we're not going to use. So like that, we're keeping the main top left one as our origin point. I now click on that top left one, but now instead of it being X as 1, it's going to be X as 2. And then also Y is 2. And now that's a 4 square one. So we've got 2. We've got our tree and we've got our rocks. What we want to do now is actually start putting those into our map but on the right layer. So how do we do that? We click across to our tile map, because that's the one we use to actually put things down. Now, at the moment, our layer is grass. So see here where we've got our tile map layers, that's where we pick which one we want to add to. We don't want to put anything more on grass at the moment. We actually want to select our trees, and see how that changes now. The grass has sort of been grayed out. We're not working with that layer anymore. We're working with a different one. Now we're going to grab our tree. See how it's highlighting the whole tree? This one here, it's only going to highlight the two parts, but over here we get the whole one. So we click on that, and then we go and put it in somewhere. There's a few trees for our guy to be surrounded by, and let's now go and change our layer to rocks. And then let's grab that big rock that we had before and maybe add 1 or 2 of those as well. Excellent. So I'm going to go Command S to save, and then I'm going to play this scene. So remember the play button up the top. Let's see what we get. All right, there he is. But as you can see, we can just walk all over those things that we added. So our guy has a collision shape, but none of these objects have collision shapes. And the way we're going to fix that is to do with how we added that physics layer thing earlier on. So let's close down what we've got here, close the window. Let's come back to our tile set. And now we've got this rock still, or I've got this rock still highlighted. You can see over here, we've got a physics menu. So I'm going to click on that physics one. It's got physics layer 0. I'm going to click on that as well. And as you start scrolling down, you can see that you can actually create a collision shape. So this one here, this little add polygon tool is what we're going to use. So I'm going to click on add polygon, and now we're going to make a collision shape for these rocks. But what I want to make sure that we do is not use the whole rock, not block out the whole rock, because we want our guy to be able to walk behind it. So the way we sort of do that is we make it, or we leave a bit of the top there unblocked out, so that way we can walk behind the top of it. So you can just keep clicking until you've got enough little dots there to make the shape that you want. Done. Now we can also do that to our tree as well. So I'm going to click up here on our tree now, and now polygon, and again I'm just going to do sort of down the bottom of it. I don't want the branches at the top to be blocked out. We only want at the bottom, because we want him to be able to walk behind the tree. So that's that done there. Those two things now have collision shapes. Let's now see if when we run this, we get anything different happening. So we're going to go up here and hit play. And now we walk across, and look, I can't walk through the tree. Can I walk behind him? No, because we haven't fixed Y sorting, but we're not doing that in this lesson. What about the rocks? Yep, I can walk into the rocks, and I can walk behind the rocks. But again, he shows as being over the top, and that's a Y sorting thing, which we're not fixing today. So there you go. You've got trees and rocks that are now objects you can't go through. They're on their own layers, so you can edit those easier later on. And we've got all these, the guy's got a collision shape, the trees and rocks have got collision shapes. So we're going to go into our must main might now, because there's a lot for you to do. And then after that, you know, pause that, work on your stuff, then we'll come back, do a bit of a debrief. There's quite a few things that you really need to do this time, and a few others that are really worth your time. So our must for this lesson is you need to activate the physics layer, which we did at the start, set up your player collision shape. Well, that was the second thing we did. You need to set up your new tile map layers. So name the blank one to grass, then you need the trees and the rocks. Import the new tile set, that forest resources. Adjust tile sizes, so making the tree like one whole thing instead of 2 separate tiles, and set up tree and rock collision shapes, which was to do with that physics property, and then adding the polygon. You might need to rewind to refresh your memory, don't worry about it. What may you like to do? Well, you might want to surround your entire map with collision shape activated objects, so your player can't walk off the map anymore, right? That's a simple tool that you can use to do that. And what you might like to do, you might like to go back into the original tile set with the grass and actually set up some of those tile sizes. So the cave, you might want that to be one thing that gets put in. You might want to also start thinking about adding collision shapes where there's water. So by just making it a collision shape, then your player can't walk onto the water part. So go into those tiles and actually set up some polygons for those as well. That's something you might like to get done. So what did we get up to in this lesson? Well, we set up our tile map physics layer, we set up our player and resource collision shapes, we also set up and named our tile map layers and placed some trees and rocks in our tile map that we could actually collide with. What are we doing next time? Well, we're going to sort out our Y sorting, we'll enhance our tile maps, and we're going to discuss gating techniques. And the quote I want to leave you with this time is from Mark Twain, and it is, "Give every day the chance to become the most beautiful day of your life." See you next time.